Hey, Sales Hacker community. Thanks for joining us and welcome back to another incredible webinar. I am Colin Campbell. I'm the Director of Marketing at Sales Hacker. I'm joined today by Travis Mosconi. Say hi, Travis. Hi. Thanks for joining, man.
Anytime.
It's good to have you here. So Travis is going to tell us today about how to solve a problem that I think we all have. So, sometimes you've lost a deal because your competitor moved faster than you. Maybe sometimes you've actually lost a deal or later on lost a customer because you moved too quickly. So at the crux of what all this is a sales process that doesn't quite fit with what your prospect needs. Maybe it works for you, and maybe it's getting your number hit, and maybe it's getting deals done. But if you have some issues in there with losing deals, maybe even during contract phase after verbal yes, it could be because your sales process just isn't quite a good fit for your prospects. So Travis has all kinds of secrets and solutions he's going to share with us today. But before we jump in, I want to do two things really quick. One, I know it's the end of the month. So if you have to jump off, we totally understand and we forgive you. We're recording this, so we'll send it to you afterwards and you can enjoy all of Travis's genius later on. The second thing is that right now, everybody go down to the bottom of the window and open the Q&A feature thing. I want to, I always feel weird when it's just two people talking on the screen. So tell us that you're here with us. What's your name? What's your favorite beverage? And we'll give you a little shout out. Also, use that feature, use the Q&A feature during the webinar. That's what Travis and I will be looking at. We'll take your questions throughout. Travis is an AE, so he's got some really good on-the-ground level experience with managing sales processes, but he's gone above and beyond with introducing some new things. So he's got cool things to share. All right, so we've got Linda Schmidt likes tequila. Anonymous likes lemonade. Hi, Anonymous. I like bourbon too, Michael. Travis, what's yours?
Oh, man. I'm a big LaCroix guy. Being in San Francisco, it's just kind of in every fridge everywhere. So always kind of readily available.
LaCroix is the one that comes in a can, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we've got a lot of booze lovers. It's only 11 a.m. Pacific time. So maybe I asked this question a little too early in the day. Maybe we're giving away some dirty secrets here.
It's
all right. Thanks everybody for opening the Q&A feature. It's really good to see you all here. I wouldn't have it any other way than to have you with me and Travis today. So without any further delay, I'm going to let Travis, who is from Concord, account executive extraordinaire, take it away and tell us all of his secrets.
Hey guys. So yeah, just wanted to kind of talk about different ways to kind of change or make little tweaks to your sales process to make sure that your customer is really going to get exactly what they need, setting expectations and making sure that you're not setting up your customer success team or your support team for failure. Just making sure that you know when to pump the brakes and making sure that it's going to be a good fit when your customer does come to you with the need. And then really talking through implementation and having everybody understand the expectations from up front so that we've certainly seen deals that we've lost in the past come back because they were promised some crazy implementation timeline and someone failed to deliver, and then they come back 9 months later after they've been paying for a software and nothing's up and running, and now they're going to go churn from whoever they signed with and find somebody else that's actually going to deliver. And setting the expectations and just being honest with them. We've got some case studies to talk about. Some takeaways that we did from some win-loss analysis that we did where we actually went and talked to customers that decided not to go with us. And why did they go with somebody else? What are those processes? And why did they go with us? What did Concord do well in the sales process that enabled us to earn their business here?
Yeah, that example you mentioned is exactly the kind of deal that nobody really wants, right? The one that's going to leave in a year, that's not going to make anybody look good. So I have some experience with, moving too quickly on deals. I have experience in customer success and dealing with deals that maybe shouldn't have been sold in the first place, but also great deals that were sold perfectly. So I'm really curious to hear your perspective too.
Absolutely. And, I work with contracts, we sell contract management software. So this is kind of a big topic for us all the time where we're constantly dealing with what happens before and after the contract. and making sure that we do meet expectations there. And, there's teams on both sides that are going to be involved and have a role as stakeholders in these, that we need to make sure that we're making them happy and covering all the bases there.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that's why we're having you on, because you guys have a really unique perspective on this from seeing the contracting process like hundreds, thousands of times in different organizations.
Yeah. So, that takes us perfectly into this next slide, where we're not really looking at contracts as a static document. The deal isn't over when you have that signature back in DocuSign or hopefully Concord. It's really just kind of the beginning of a different relationship. So we see that contracts are really just a business process, and they're sitting in between, your initial introduction to a company and really getting to know them and becoming a partner, strategically going forward. So whether it's, sales and billing, or whether it's implementation and purchasing and recruiting and actually hiring people, contracts really sit between every business process. So we're focusing on the sales side today and how we can help out there. But of course, there's all kinds of different things going on. And, really importantly for sales, we run a SaaS model. I know a lot of people on the line do as well. It's really important that, you realize most of your revenue is coming from renewals. So making sure, we do have a pretty high cost for a lot of folks of actually getting a customer in the door through that marketing budget. That's why they get the numbers that they do to go spend on, advertising and videos and all kinds of content and events, because that cost to get a customer is going to be high. Let's make sure that we keep them around for a while, and that we're not just signing one-year deals and churning things. And there's a lot of tips and tricks that we can have there to make this as simple as possible from a business perspective.
I love this idea of sales extending ownership past the point of signature. Like, you're not just taking a prospect from point A to point B and then ghosting on everybody. Yeah. I know, from the marketing side, we're seeing that a lot too. A couple of years ago, the growth marketer was a relatively new role where they care about retention, right? There are now customer marketing roles opening where they care about upsell and marketing to the existing customer base. How do you see salespeople extending ownership past the point of the deal being signed?
Well, it's the same thing that you're going to expect between that handoff from marketing and the SLAs that you have in place between what your SDRs or BDRs or whatever you call them at your organization are going to provide you with that information. You also should have the same responsibility to set up the rest of your teammates. You have customer success reps, as we call them, that you want to make sure that you're not just dropping some nightmare on their plate. It's a mutual respect thing of making sure that you're not setting your teammates up for a hard time, and that you really can pass along the information that you got so that the customer is going to be more happy. If they have to come in and explain all of their problems to an SDR before they can even get a demo, and then you go through however long your sales process is of really digging into exactly how you're going to help them, the products and services that you provide to enable them to be successful for whatever the pain point is you're tackling. And then if they have to go explain that again a third time, that's just going to be fatigued. You really want to make sure that you're giving your customer, the quickest path to success, but at the same time that you're handling your side of the bargain here by passing along that information to everybody else that's going to be involved in this process over, the coming weeks, months, years, depending on, the products and services that you're providing.
Yeah. So I want to tell you a really quick story, because I think I've felt this pain, like I said, on both ends. I used to have a sales leader who led the organization in sales as though you say yes to everything. It was a marketing agency, and then figure out how to deliver that later on. And it got deals done, right? Clients loved hearing that we could do things, and then we would figure out how to do it. And most of the time it worked out because we were damn good, if I do say so myself. But there was this kind of breakdown in philosophy between that sales leader and the person leading the delivery side of things, the people who are actually doing the work. And a lot of times we felt caught off guard. We end up working late, we're doing things. So the disconnect wasn't at the people on the ground, the people doing the work, the salespeople and the people doing the work. The disconnect was between two leaders. And I know a lot of times salespeople and customer success can feel disconnected from the ability to have any impact there, to smooth out that handoff or make the process any better. So what can salespeople even do?
Yeah, I mean, great transition to the next slide that we have prepared. Is just making sure that, if it is something that you want to formalize and put into like an SLA, so that there are a minimum standard of the information that needs to get passed back and forth. Everybody needs to be involved kind of at the table when you're designing these processes or making iteration to these processes, because they're not always going to be perfect. It's going to take a couple tries of changing things through to find out, like what information is really mission critical to make that next team successful, and how do we, get and capture that information from the prospect, before they become a customer, and then after they become a customer, how do we transition and pass that information along? And there's a lot of tools and a lot of things from different parts of leadership, but it really needs to be a collaborative effort from all the parties involved to go through and understand your sales process. And I mean, that's why we did this win-loss analysis, is to find out where some of the frustrations were with people that either eventually signed with us or decided to go a different direction with their project, and trying to figure out, what kind of key points and insights you can take away from that to make it better from the sales perspective.
Yeah. In my experience, so I had, same issue. I wasn't tying the leaders together. I wasn't doing a good job, but I decided to just try to tackle it myself. And I didn't think of it as creating an SLA. I don't even knew that I wasn't even trying to solve that problem, really. I was just trying to understand better what the breakdown was. And so I did like an audit of our handover process and just listed like, here's who does what, here's the timeline of all the different steps from, the deal being signed to hopefully a renewal or an upsell. And then I sat down with one salesperson and we looked at that together, and they learned things and I learned things that were, so we were each looking at the same thing that we hadn't done before. They saw places where we were taking actions that they didn't know about. And I found things that, they were selling or they were promising customers that we weren't doing, or things that we were doing that customers had no idea we were going to do because it didn't come up during the sales process. So I forget, I'm going to misattribute this quote because I don't remember actually who said it, but somebody said, almost always the answer to a business problem is better communication. And I feel like that's it. You have this note here about regular weekly check-ins. Can you tell us a little bit about what goes on in those?
Yeah. So, I mean, what's going to happen is not everything is created equal. Not all opportunities in Salesforce, not all the information that you capture from a customer, not all of that is going to be equal. Some people come through, they have a really good understanding of their needs. They want something yesterday and they're ready to sign tomorrow. It's making sure that, you treat those customers and the ones that have that 8-month that evaluation plan, that you're capturing all of the same information from them, and that when you make that handoff, hey, like, what could we have done better here? So like, it's the same feedback you get from like your SDR. Like you're going to give it back. If somebody gives you an opportunity that's like, oh yeah, we're not planning on getting anything until 2025. It's like, okay, this doesn't need to be on my desk now. Like, let's provide them with the information that they need and make sure that we check in with them on a regular basis to see if anything changes there. But also, like, at the same time, if you're passing off customers and you figure out that some of your sales reps have been promising the sun, the moon, and the stars, and it's not something that we can give them, like, let's make sure that we pump the brakes there and that we go have a chat about, what are these expectations that we're setting? What information are we providing with? And let's not make any promises that we know we can't keep. We all want to say yes all the time. We're salespeople. We're trying to get the deal done. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we're not just going to pass the buck off to someone else as soon as our part of the equation is done. And I mean, that's that expression, that the answer to everything in business. I've heard so many coaches over like in my athletic career when I was growing up, that was the answer every single time. If your coach had a question for you after the game, what could we do better? If you answered communication, you were always right. I
love it. So in those weekly check-ins, you're saying that you'll do like almost like post-mortems, like, okay, this deal just got done being handed over. We've got sales, we've got customer success, we've got product all here. Let's talk about every little bit of that handover. Is that what it is? You're getting in on each deal?
It's not going to be the same every week. It's just, I think people are going to have things that are top of mind for hey, what's stressing you out this week for this entire team? Or like, hey, product, this is the feedback that we've been getting. Here's a feature request that's come up X amount of times now. Let's make sure that we communicate that, both up and down the ladder between everybody that's going to be involved, from product all the way through to, management, making sure that everybody's aware of everything that's going on, the feedback that we're getting, so that we can make informed decisions. Because that's what we're always looking to do, is improve our decision-making skills and make sure that we're focusing on the things that are going to be the most beneficial for the organization.
Oh, I love that. So, I was thinking, with 3 different departments there, you'd want to like tightly control the agenda, but keeping it loose actually sounds like it makes it easier for everybody to chime in. And, so it's not just like a unilateral meeting, like let's make these deals better for customer success. Everybody gets their chance, right?
Well, yeah, you want to make sure that you're not having like a 3-hour internal meeting that's not going to be, a good way to spend time for everybody involved. Because if you take half your company into a meeting, and that can go on, like there will be problem ways. Sometimes it comes up, but you have to set an agenda. You have to give each team a time to kind of voice their grievances, suggest a solution to the problem, and you're not necessarily going to come up with a solution in that meeting. But, the airing of the grievances is always something that's nice to do, and make sure that, people are on the same page, that management's getting honest feedback, and that people aren't afraid to express it like openly.
Yeah. Oh, so there's a lot here. And you mentioned earlier that, we're salespeople, we want to get the deal done. We want to say yes to everything. I've certainly experienced that, but I've also seen salespeople who are really good at avoiding that. Like, what do you think differentiates those people? And what's their ability to avoid being the yes person that ends up selling like a future product roadmap or capabilities that don't exist?
Yeah. So, you can't sell what you don't have. So it's making sure that, again, like if you're promising a feature that is like, we see the roadmap, we're aware of things on there, but we have to be, mature enough to make sure that we're not going out, like I said before, promising the sun, the moon, and the stars. Let's make sure that we understand what is our offering right now. And we want to say yes, that we have this feature that they're asking for that's going to make, a 1% difference in actually how they use it, whether or not they know that. Let's make sure that we talk to them and we're openly honest about what we have now. So like a huge topic in all kinds of industries is like machine learning. People talk about it all the time. And, there's some instances that it is pretty good, but for the most part, there's a reason that we're pouring so much development effort from like an R&D perspective on, billion, trillion-dollar businesses into making that better. Is because it's not great yet. So if we say that we have it, let's make sure that we kind of, qualify that with a little bit of like we have it, but like, look, it's going to continue to get better. I don't want you to think that this is going to be 100% accurate at this time, if you've even released it. So it's making sure that, we are mindful of things that could come up down the road, and that we're open, with the things that we're going to commit to on the roadmap. But, something could come up tomorrow from the security side, and your entire development team might be pulled off of building that new feature to go have a bug fix or lock everything back down. Maybe there's a breach. That's going to put the halt on everything that's going on. So understanding that, don't commit to things that we can't deliver on and that we can't be 100% about. Let's just be realistic, and people will appreciate that. Like, go ahead.
I'm just going to dig in here a little bit, because it feels a little counterintuitive to me, because maybe it's just a vicious circle. So like, what if your competitors are promising amazing futures, right? Like, aren't you going to lose deals if you don't, sell the future roadmap and your competitors are?
You might. And I think it's just understanding, are these the deals that we want to win? Do we want to win, this large enterprise deal that we have to completely change our roadmap for and develop X, Y, and Z feature? Or do we want to find the people that fit our niche right now? And as we continue to expand our service offering, do we want to, from, an entire company perspective, be such a good business partner to everybody that we set expectations and we're honest with them? And I think, sometimes we think of like, salesperson is a bad word, and it's making sure that like, if you're honest with people and you set expectations and you deliver on those, you're creating a great experience. And it's making sure that you kind of own that experience from start to finish as a company, from the marketing channel all the way through, you know, product sales, engineering, anything through the entire customer journey. And the more open and honest you are with people, I found makes the process a lot easier, where you don't have to like dodge and kind of duck and skirt a question and, you know, kind of take it off to the side or meander around it. If you're just direct with people, they really appreciate that, especially during the evaluation process, because it's tough. You know, they're going to be looking at a ton of different softwares. They're not going to remember, you know, specifically which features everybody had. Yeah. But if you're honest with them and you're easy to work with and you're straightforward, direct, and truthful with everything, I found it makes you, you know, you get considered in a lot of deals that you might not have all the bells and whistles, but because of how easy and the relationship that you kind of start there, it's going to make that whole process a lot easier.
We've come full circle because we started by talking about how the SaaS business, like the money doesn't come until renewal, and that's why salespeople are taking a long view. But I feel like where we are now is that actually salespeople are taking the long view because they've found that it ends up helping in the long run, right? Like you get, like you said, you're building kind of a personal brand of trust. You're building the business's brand as a trustworthy brand. You get considered in more deals. We have a good question here from Jason Harris. Thanks for submitting that, Jason. So what happens when you have set expectations? And you can just talk about what happens to you, Travis, when this happens. And then other internal forces at Concord make you unable to meet those expectations. Like, how do you as a salesperson, how are you affected, but also how can you step in and like, what do you do in that scenario?
That's a great question. You know, we see that all the time where like there's different forces that have a say in what happens with your deals, whether it's legal, whether it's, again, you know, things on the roadmap that aren't going to be delivered. And, you know, there are some factors that are going to be outside of your control. Again, it's communicating those. It's not something that I deal with too often, but I mean, whether it's pricing, you know, if you're trying to get, hey, can I give them this extra 10% to make this deal happen? And management tells you no, like it's communicating that effectively and being able to just like think about it from like a management perspective and like how you can kind of adapt and change and, you know, voice that opinion in that weekly meeting to see like, hey, this came up this time. How can we make it better next time? Like, do I have the correct idea of expectations here? Or is this just a one-off instance that, you know, is kind of an extenuating circumstance that we can't really control?
I love it. So logical, Travis. By the way, Jason's favorite beverage is also my favorite beverage. I didn't share mine. Extra dirty martini with blue cheese stuffed olives. Ooh. Good taste, Jason.
My dad's drink. Awesome.
Jason, let us know if you have a follow-up. I'm going to let Travis move on.
Yeah, let's hop into the next slide. Oh. Do I know how the buttons work? There we go. So yeah, I mean, like one of the biggest things that this is going to come up with is setting those expectations is implementation. Like everybody has a different timeline. Everybody has different efforts that are going to be involved. Some people charge for it. Some people don't. Sometimes there's professional services that happen there. Depending on your product, you know, it might be a completely self-serve platform or product that you're offering to someone, or it might be something that it's really complicated. The last company I was at sold project portfolio management software. Real sexy stuff. And, you know, it takes you as an account executive 3 months as you're going through that promotion path to get certified on all the different modules. So you have to make it really clear from the beginning when you're talking to people, like, hey, implementation and training might take a while. These are the resources that we're going to have to allocate. Like, we want you guys to be successful because ultimately we're looking for, you know, a renewal here and we're looking for a continued business relationship and partnership. Here's the reason, like, there's a give and take on both sides. Like, let's set those expectations really clearly up front, but let's also ask that, hey, like, we understand that this might be, you know, a really time-intensive process for implementation. It's not with Concord, so it's not a problem I have to deal with too much anymore. But, you know, if it's going to take 3 months of training for all of the end users to get a grasp of how these things work, let's make sure that there's going to be support services, whether it's chat or by phone, available for people to, you know, get an understanding on that. And we're going to have some SLAs around that. Maybe you're 24/5, maybe you're 24/7, maybe you're 12/7, depending on the market that you're serving. But it's understanding and also asking for those resources from the other team. It's just like, hey, so we're going to do a group webinar training session here. You guys have 30 people that are going to be a part of that. Like, this is 3:00 on a Thursday that we have this set up for. Can we make sure that, we get coffee or like some donuts in that meeting so that people are actually paying attention? It's trying to make sure that folks are engaged, because adoption is a huge metric for renewals. And if people don't use your software, they won't like it, and then they won't renew, and then there goes that whole business model.
Yeah. Oops. So that's a good kind of way to like skirt that objection, because I know implementation time can be a big one for some products. So the example you just gave is like somebody says, oh, that implementation time is too long. You have the ability, you hope, to offer like additional support or services. What other advice can you give our viewers for who maybe they work somewhere where implementation time is like your last job, where it's 3 months or longer? How, and they're in a sales deal and they bring that up. They're trying to be honest and truthful, and it feels like it's going to kill the deal. How can they save that, or at least maybe present it in a way that it doesn't feel like a negative?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of ways to go there. Like, utilize the resources available to you. You have a marketing team. They're getting paid. They've got all this spend that they can put. It's fair for us to put an ask around that. Like, let's ask, hey, can you help me build out an implementation roadmap so that I can share this with people? They can have a tangible document or something on their computer to get an understanding of what's going to happen, the resources that are going to be required. Maybe you have some customer success stories along with that, where you kind of highlight where we went well and where we can differentiate ourselves. But again, it's, the honesty thing, and making sure that, the experience that they get is in line with what you promised during a sales cycle, and just aligning those and making sure that expectations are really set and understood, early, often, and repeated is going to help. And I think, there's tons of resources that you can bring. If it's grabbing that implementation manager that's going to be assigned to that account, because you might know that well ahead of time, and bring them into the process and have them kind of talk through, like, look, it's going to be a 5-step process. Here's step 1. It usually takes about this long. Here's step 2. This is the longest process. This might be that data migration from other systems. And there is going to be some work required here, where we're going to have to figure out how we're going to take all of these kind of processes and data points that are all over the place and consolidate those, and trying to walk them through, bringing in the subject matter experts. Like, when you get to an IT review on the contract, or when people are evaluating your software and the IT guys at the table, you're grabbing that resource then. Let's make sure that, if you have resources that pertain to particular areas of the business or of that sales process or of, expectations after, loop them in. I mean, if you can get their time, if they're not completely swamped, let's try and get them in there and make sure that, everybody's on the same page. And again, that's going to help with that kind of passing on of the knowledge to that implementation and customer success team, because they've been brought in, they've heard firsthand from the horse's mouth exactly what they're looking for. And then we're going back and forth and really making sure that it's a collaborative effort. Again, going back to communication, it's always the answer.
I especially like the idea of just bringing. So, you've done your job, you've not oversold, and you have all these customers now that have stuck with you, even in not an ideal scenario, through like potentially a long implementation process, and they've renewed. And now you're talking to a new prospect who says, implementation process is too long. I love your point about just like bringing in customer stories, case studies, maybe even referrals, to just say, hey, look, like, you might think it's too long. Maybe you have a fair point. Like, it takes time to develop, but look, we have these customers here who went through that process and they renewed and they love us. Why don't you just talk to them?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you're all over it today, Colin, with the transitions here. Is like, you might lose a deal because somebody else promised something, and because, maybe their process is a bit different, their software is structured differently, their services that they provide come with this extra whatever. It's going to happen. You're not going to win 100% of your deals. And if you do, Send me your resume. We're hiring. I want that referral bonus. But yeah, like, I've seen this really recently. It was just a couple of months ago. We had a customer come back to us that we'd been in a sales cycle with at end of the year 2017. And they came back and they were dissatisfied because they were using one of our competitors for, they signed a deal, they were made the promise, whether they undercut us on price or whatever they did, we don't have visibility all the time into our competitors' tactics. I mean,
sure, but they won the deal for some reason, whatever it was.
They got in there, and here we are, 10 months later when we picked up the conversation again, and they weren't live. They weren't using any part of that software that they had paid for. They paid the implementation fee. They paid for 1 year of services. It's a 12-month contract. You don't get that back. And what we did is, exactly what we talked about. This wasn't my personal deal, but it was another one of our reps that he brought in all the additional resources. He brought in sales management. He brought in implementation resources. He brought in customer success. And he made sure that, be a resource hawk. You're in sales. Like, this is ultimately the number at the end of the year that oftentimes is really like the most important thing that investors look at or whoever is looking at. It might not be necessarily the biggest success metric. There's other things that certainly are involved there, but use as many resources as you can to make your life easier to, communicate this process. And, afterwards we were able to talk through, and this one was primarily around implementation, where it's like, look, our average implementation timeline is 12 days. Here's exactly how it works. There's 4 steps in this process. We're going to walk you through every single one. We'll tell you who needs to be at each one of these meetings. If you guys want to go faster, let's make sure that we start blocking out time on people's calendars now, because, we can only move as fast as you guys can. I'm happy to, get you guys up and running tomorrow, but that's not realistic. Let's make sure that we get, everybody's time blocked out on both sides of the table to make sure that we're going to be successful there.
I love that phrase, that's not realistic. I was reading this, I forget what it was, a newsletter about adult development theory, which is interesting, guys and gals. I think you'll be intrigued if you go Wikipedia that adult development theory. It was basically talking about how, in business you want to have an adult to adult relationship. Like you have to each be willing to say no. You have to each be willing to be autonomous in your own needs. And even in a sales or in a customer service relationship, if you're providing service or you're trying to win a customer and you're acting like you're their child and you're taking orders for them and saying yes to everything, it's not healthy for anybody. And so like even just gentle phrases like that's not realistic, I think is a great thing to seed into conversations when it's true.
Yeah. I mean, it really is a two-way street. Like, I'm happy to reschedule a meeting if you can't do something, but like, let's be respectful of everybody's time going both ways. And it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
It really is okay. Like, adults tell each other no all the time. Your boss tells you no all the time. Your girlfriend tells you no all the time. Like, it's okay to have a dialogue there and kind of reason through things and explain, kind of this current state of affairs, what your suggestion is, if that's going to be suitable for them. And if not, okay, let's move on to the next thing. We'll put a big red X next to this one because we didn't check that box.
100%. I love it.
And then let's see what else we've got. I mean, we can hop on to the next one, or, if there's any other questions too. I mean, I'm sure that there's stuff that we haven't covered. And I think the next slide I've got is just our key takeaways if we want to move on to that. Yeah,
Tori doesn't have a question, but earlier Tori Tucker mentioned you will definitely lose deals by, being the honest competitor and not selling the future and not underestimating the time to implementation. It sounded like Tori might have more to weigh in on there. So Tori, if you have a question about that, feel free. I also know Tori enjoys a great IPA. But let's hop to key takeaways, Travis.
Cool. And I mean, going along with that, like, you are going to lose deals, absolutely, but you're also going to have less churn, hopefully. I mean, that's the goal. So, I mean, if you're able to keep, a higher percentage of your customers for longer, I think ultimately that's going to be a better look for the business, whether that's on, investor slides that you're putting together for your next board meeting, if that's something that you're running through sales management, like, hey, I might only have a 20% close rate, but all of those deals that I sold last year, we only lost one. And so I have like a 98% retention rate. So it's making sure that, there are different metrics that you can kind of push on and different levers to pull to make that look better or worse, depending on how you're looking at it. So, I mean, it's all data. You can kind of construe it however you want and, shift it one way and make it, it's up to what you're focusing on as a business.
Taking the long view for the win. So I loved all these points you made, and there was a lot packed into this. So I want to make sure we get just summarized really well. But Tori chimed in. He said he'd rather have customers that stay through the long haul. Just the point, you will lose the deals for transparency. Oh yeah, 100%, Tori. I think it's just being willing to take that on the chin because it's the right thing to do. Ultimately, I feel like that's part of the job. If the whole job was saying yes to everybody, then any old person could do it. You all have the luxury of having amazing sales jobs because you're the ones that do it right.
Yeah. And also there's different amounts of like product fit, or like you might not want to sell a deal if they're only going to be utilizing 20% of the capabilities of the software that you're selling. Whereas like, let's look for those ones that are really going to look and utilize every little module or piece of the pie that are going to be really happy, so that when you do release a new feature, it's something that they might not even have been thinking about. So just making sure that people are going to be a good fit. And it's okay to tell people like, look, I think that there are better offerings out there for your current business needs. It's a maturity process for a lot of different types of software. And there's things that are meant to serve different kind of tiers of the business, from SMB to mid-market to enterprise. And it's making sure that you align your sales process with ultimately the product fit. If you're not enterprise ready and you try and go sell, the Apples and the Oracles and the massive corporations of the world, that might be a huge resource strain on either your CS team. You might have to go hire additional resources just to dedicate to that account. You might have to develop and commit to making additional features that could sideline your roadmap that you previously had. So it's making sure that you're really going after your piece of the pie and what's going to be a good fit, focusing on that, and then expanding your offering as you go.
And that's a place where those weekly meetups between product, CS, and sales can be really useful, because you guys can say, hey, look, we had this inbound lead from this giant corporation. Let's talk about it before I dive into making this deal happen, right? Yeah. Hey, we have a question here from Tessa O'Brien. Can you speak to HubSpot's CRM? Do you have any thoughts on that? Have you ever used it?
I've never used HubSpot. I've been, thankful enough to only have to have used Salesforce up to this point, and I'm not sure how much I like Lightning, but it's you got to keep on evolving and understanding different things. But I don't have any experience with HubSpot, so I can't really speak to it.
Do you guys use any tools or processes or like documents that help you manage your handoff to the customer success team? What does that look like at Concord?
Yeah. So, that's been an iterative process for us, for a while. I've been here for long enough that I've seen a lot of processes change as we continue to grow and scale. But, formally it was just, hey, get what information you can and make sure that you pass that along. Or like you use like the BANT qualification metrics or Fin or any of those things. But then we kind of formalized it a little bit. We made like a Google sheet that you were having to fill out and attach to the opportunity before you were allowed to get pricing. It proved not, to be the greatest thing from an endpoint perspective to have to fill out every time, but you knew your deal. You knew everything about what was going on with that customer. Yep. And it was nice. And then, made some additional hires on kind of the organization and ops side. And now all of those kind of data fields have been formalized and turned into required fields in Salesforce. Mm-hmm. So that if you want to progress that deal to the next stage, or you want to win that, you need to have that information about the business case, or about, the timeline that they need to have for implementation, or certain features that are going to be mission critical, or integrations that they're going to need to pass along to that, implementation team. And it's making sure that you don't have to formalize it. It's nice if you kind of put some stage gates in there from
Yep.
from the sales perspective to make you slow down, because it does make you better at Salesforce hygiene, which is really important just to have that information in there. I think Salesforce hygiene is the most important thing a sales rep can do, is, making sure that you have everything in there. Because we've all seen, rep turnover where all of a sudden you're inheriting deals from people that are no longer at the company, and you go digging through and nothing is in Salesforce. So you have to restart that sales process. And it's, again, a bad experience. So the more information that you have that's easily transferable, so for that dissemination of knowledge to other teams and stakeholders in the process, is really going to make it helpful.
That was a good question from CF Jackson, and good answer at Travis. I 100% agree that having like one single source of truth, like you recommend Salesforce, is critical. When I worked in CS, we had Salesforce as our single source of truth. So if I got a new account, I would do all my research there. But we also had a standard process where it was just a 15 to 30-minute meeting between the salesperson and the account manager, so that you could get stuff that might not be in Salesforce, like personality notes, weird experiences had during the sale, all of that stuff. We were selling very customized services, so a little bit different. But I think that's the point here, and that takes me back to something we said earlier, is that like you need to develop your own SLA. There's no such thing as like a silver bullet or a bunch of silver bullets of like, here's exactly how everybody should do a handoff. Here's how everybody's sales process should work. It's about communication. It's about setting up the weekly touches. It's about finding a way to build an SLA between departments. And again, we said, like, audit it, take note, take inventory of everything that happens right now in the handover process, and then get together and talk about what about that works and what doesn't. And then ultimately, like, having something documented that's customer facing about that handover process so that they can understand it clearly is kind of like the final step.
Yeah, I don't think there's any perfect way to do it, because not every organization is the same. Not every lead is the same. Not every customer is the same. It's making sure that as you get more experience understanding your internal processes, external buying processes, that you take those into consideration as you revamp processes, because nothing's set in stone. Let's make sure that we're going to take feedback and respond to it, and that we're going to be proactive as well, and start foreseeing problems that might be coming up on the horizon because of however we're doing things. And if it takes customer feedback to get that, it's nice to be able to get those insights. Or if, people come back to you and have different processes at a different company, like if you're out at a bar with your buddy and they're just like, well, we do it this way. It's, having the, I'm trying to think of a good way to say this, having the drive to go and take that to your team, even if it makes you uncomfortable, to go talk to your VP of sales about like, hey, why don't we do it this way? If they've got time to respond to you there, like, it's nice to have that little communication, or maybe that kind of spurs a conversation down the line. But it's making sure that, feedback goes up and down, and we make sure that everybody understands why we do things, how we do things, and, how we might do things in the future.
Yeah. And one point I think that we kind of glossed over almost, and shame on me for not drawing more attention to it, but the fact is, like, a lot of this insight comes from Concord doing a great job talking to customers and building relationships where there's a feedback loop about, the process and what worked and what didn't, and doing postmortems. Like, you had that case study with the deal that you lost last year, and Jason Harris just made that point in the questions. He said, it's not mentioned in this discussion, but it's important to develop personal relationships with customers outside of the office. And he actually has a question here too. Travis, do you think it's appropriate or inappropriate for reps to follow customers on Facebook and Instagram?
It depends on what kind of stuff you're putting up, and, all of that. It's a maturity model from a personal perspective. It's, if the stuff on my Instagram is me going out with my friends every weekend, maybe that's not something I want to display in a professional setting to people that I interact with. You want to keep home life home and work life work, and make sure that, you're putting your best foot forward at each. I don't see anything wrong with it. It's just control the content and control your own personal brand, and whatever that is, understanding, how it might affect things down the line. Like we're seeing, that kind of generation that grew up with Facebook when, I got it in high school, moving through and seeing how that's kind of affecting people now that all their dirty laundry is available on the internet. And
what about like using your customers or your prospects' social media profiles to inform how you build a relationship with them?
Oh, got it. I mean, I'm not going to say that I haven't gone in there and taken a look at, maybe some common interests before. So it's like, oh, hey, this guy really likes Phil's coffee. Maybe I should, try and get this prospect who's also in San Francisco over to Phil's coffee, or, just little things that you can play on. If maybe it's sending them something after the deal's done. If someone's been a tremendous champion for you and you know that they have an interest in this, that, or the other thing, just a little token of appreciation for their help in the process, because at the end of the day, they determine how much you get paid at the end of the month.
There it is. Yeah. All right. If there's any other questions, squeeze them in now. Other than that, I think we're going to wrap up. So this was great, Travis. I just want to highlight what we talked about today, because there was a lot here. My personal takeaways are that it's not always totally within the salesperson's control to decide, which customers they disqualify, right? Sometimes they're under pressure to say yes to a lot of stuff. But there are certain actions that they can take to start educating, to start building those bridges across departments, and to start building trust with customers so that prospects enjoy the sales process a little bit more, even if they don't close. So those tips were create weekly touch bases, use that and audit your handover process to build an SLA, keep a single source of truth, and just keep the long view. Don't overpromise. Know that you're going to lose some deals, but know that honesty in the long run builds better personal brand, and you'll be considered in more deals in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Damn, we did it. Thank you so much for joining, Travis. It was great to have you. Travis Mosconi from Concord. It's been magical. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Hope you see us soon on another Sales Hacker webinar, and take care.